China Watch Radio is brought to you in part by Sushi Market Sprouts on 7th in Santa Cruz and Kaito in the Capitol Mall Food Court. Treat yourself to the finest Japanese cuisine you'll find anywhere with fresh sushi to go and delicious ramen dinners. Sushi Market Sprouts and Kaito. Yum!
Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is China Watch Radio. Michael Olson on the boards here. Before I introduce our cast of thousands today, a quick note. This morning I had the opportunity to give 50 American flags to 50 first graders.
Whoa.
On the condition that they learn how to do the Pledge of Allegiance. And so I had them seated on the floor, all 50 of them, and I held up my miniature American flag, and I said, we're going to do the Pledge of Allegiance. And so, follow me, and I said, I pledge. And they all said, I pledge. And I said, well, what is a pledge? And we had to come up with what a pledge is. And then when we got to the word republic, how do I tell first graders about what a republic is? And so what I said is that there's kind of two different ways of governing people. One is a republic, and the other is an autocracy. Okay? In a republic, the power is at the bottom, and it goes up. People on the bottom tell people on the top what to do. In an autocracy, the power is at the top, and it works its way down. Today, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to hear about an autocracy called China, and you're going to see why a republic is a very good deal. So this is China Watch Radio. Michael Olson on the boards for Billy Graff, who is on the job in Scotts Valley, but I bet he's there. Are you there, Billy?
I am indeed.
There you go. And also with us today, we have Amy Howe.
Hello. Good morning. Good afternoon.
David Welch.
What a civics lesson. I love that, Michael.
Thank you. David's here. Alexander.
Good afternoon.
And Alexander's our intern from the University of California. Susan's on the board in there. Jaunty. Where's Jaunty? Jaunty's in the woods.
I'm right here. I'm in your ears.
Okay, good. And Jaunty's there. And Nury, are you there?
Yes, I am here.
Oh, boy. Okay, Nury's with us today in Virginia. But Nury is going to be the star of the show. So hang in there for one of the most incredible shows on China that you will ever hear. But to kick it off, we have a question that we always like to ask a question that will help you think your way through our show today. Our question today, is China a prison? What do you think about that? Well, you probably scratch your head and say, how could you folks come up with something so stupid? Well, hang in there. And at the end of the show, I'll bet you have an answer as to whether China is or is not a prison. So we're going to start off today with some news items. We're going to burn through them really quickly before we get to our guest, Nury Turkel, who is the author of a brand new book, just out. I mean, it's just out. It would probably burn my fingers when I read it. So it's called No Escape. That kind of fits in with the prison theme, right? No escape. So, Jaunty, let's start with you today and your piece of news.
Yeah, well, I mean, not really news so much. I just wanted to try and provide our audience with a little bit of background information with regards to the circumstance in Xingjian province with specifically regarding the Uyghurs. I'm sure our guest might have more accurate information than I've put together here, but I'm going to do my best. Now, for those who don't know, Xinjiang province is a region of what's considered part of China at this point in time, but it's a very long and diverse history. It's right in the absolute center of Asia. It's a big region. It's give or take about the size of Alaska. It borders Tibet, Afghanistan, Kashmir, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, Russia, and Mongolia, as well as, of course, China. So needless to say, it's in a strategically relevant part of the world. It's also very mineral rich and things of that nature. Now, the Uyghurs used to be the majority population in the Xinjiang province, known to the Uyghurs as East Turkestan. But millions of Han Chinese started moving into the area, starting even in the 40s, but accelerating very much in the 60s, 70s, and continuing to this day. So there's this kind of not displacement, but where once the place was majority Uyghur, now the Han people, the Han Chinese, are the majority population. Since about 2000, the Uyghurs have protested unfair treatment. The Han would provide favorable employment opportunities to other Han. Essentially, is a lot of that, but there's a lot more to it, as we'll find out during the show. There was some sort of incident. I would love to have found more details about this, where some Uyghur factory workers were killed by a mob of Han Chinese, and this sparked a riot that broke out in July of 2009, where it was essentially two different peoples, and there were violent riots, and a couple hundred people died. In 2016, the Chinese Communist Party began building a surveillance system, which turned Xinjiang into the most heavily monitored place on Earth. Uyghurs are banned from saying from things like fasting during Ramadan, naming their children traditional Muslim names, or having the wrong kind of beard. Just to give you an idea of some of the measures that have been instituted against these people's culture. In 2017, the CCP began detaining large portions of the Uyghur population in what they refer to as re-education centers, but are actually prison camps, enormous prison camps. The eyewitnesses, human rights experts have reported that political indoctrination, torture, forced sterilizations of women, a variety of horrific things occur inside of these camps. To give you an idea of the scale, it's somewhere over 1 million, possibly as much as 3 million people are detained in these facilities. And I believe there's about 11 million Uyghurs in total, just to give you an idea of what portion of their population has been subjected to these prison camps.
And that's something I'm sure we're going to learn a whole bunch about, too, when we have our guest tuning in today. So shall we move on? Jonty, you got
Absolutely.
May I add a couple of points?
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Amy,
so,
how?
Yeah.
First
China
of all, how do you pronounce Xinjiang?
Xinjiang, new province. Xinjiang.
New?
That's, new province. It's Xinjiang.
New what?
New province is Xinjiang, they
Okay,
call it.
there
yeah.
you go,
So
Xinjiang.
in China is a large country, so have about 56 minorities.
Mm-hmm.
So they call, just like nations, like this American Indian, they have
Right.
200 nations, whatever it is. And so all speak different language. And then the Muslim are talking about this, not just in Uyghurs. They also, Uyghur in China, they call whirlwind. That's in China, Mandarin.
Mandarin,
Yeah. And then it basically Hui is the majority. Hui is all Muslims. The Muslims have a different thing, but the original, I think, Hui, this all during the Ottoman Empire and from Turkey. So they still have a lot of roots in Turkey. Mm-hmm. And then the Viking, original, I'm talking about in Xinjiang province, and people from Viking. Interesting enough. But they're Muslim because of the look. So they totally look different from Han. Because they have blue eye, tall and white face, the skin. Blue eyes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and very tall, and And then, and some they have long hairs, totally different from Han. So the 1960s, I have a lot of cousins. They all forced them into new program from Shanghai and Beijing, because they want the Chinese government, CCP wanted to rebalance the ratios over there. So that's have
too many Uyghurs there. We need to bring
because they are Muslims. They wash Allah. They not wash Mao. So that's the thing. So I just added a couple
now
of
we
things.
get right to the heart of the issue. They were worshiping Allah, and they were not worshiping Chairman Mao.
Yeah. So that's.
Okay, good. Thank you, Amy. I'm going to pick up a quick story here from Radio Free Asia. Chinese police officer, kind of in a way that nobody would find out who he is, told Radio Free Asia that the Chinese government has issued directives across Xinjiang, forbidding the Uyghurs from discussing the brainwashing camps in their province. So you can't talk to anybody about what's going on here. That's that. Furthermore, you can't take any phone calls from foreign countries. You can't do that either. And the reason for this is that the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Michelle Bachelet, or something like that, who is the former socialist president of Chile, is going to be touring Xinjiang for the purpose of judging the human rights of China. Okay? Now, the big question will be, will the UN High Commissioner see what the CCP wants her to see, or will they see what the CCP does not want her to see? This trip, to me, is highly reminiscent of the WHO trip to Wuhan, China, to investigate COVID-19. So another dog and pony show that probably won't go anywhere. So that's my news for the day. Next up, David.
Yeah, so talking about Xinjiang province again, there's an interesting report out of China that 83 major brands, consumer brands, are implicated in using forced labor of ethnic minorities from Xinjiang assigned out to factories across China. In fact, the study itself from the Australian Strategy Policy Institute, ASPI, in the report they identified these 83 foreign and Chinese companies that have allegedly directly and indirectly benefiting from the use of Uyghur workforce. Now,
did you say that they're taking him out of Xinjiang and shipping him around to different factories throughout China?
China. And I think, Johnny, you may have had a report a few months ago where there was some backfill of COVID, because of COVID into factories using Uyghur labor, and this report is further confirmation of that. It estimates that 80,000 Uyghurs were transferred out of Xinjiang and transferred to factories in a range of supply chains, including electronics, textiles, automobiles, under a central government policy known as Xinjiang Aid.
Xinjiang Aid. Huh?
So this occurred. So this report actually looked at companies over the last 5 years, which is relatively recent, right? Including the 2 years we've been suffering under COVID. They reached out to the 83 brands, and the responses that came back were really interesting. Most of them had kind of a denial, non-denial, or they had a denial of various weight. Most of them centered around saying something like, we confident in our investigation that we're not using Uyghur labor in Xinjiang. Well, the report wasn't about using labor within that province. It was using labor in their factories shipped from that province, which they were silent on in their denials. There are also some very interesting marquee companies like Apple, Esprit, and Fila who had no response to the report whatsoever.
Not saying.
David, could you give us an idea of what some of these companies are? You just mentioned a couple, but the list is, I think, would be beneficial for the audience.
Just a sampling. I guess, thanks, Johnny. It's Abercrombie & Finch, Adidas, Amazon, BMW, Gap, H&M, Marks & Spencer, Nike, Puma, Samsung, Apple. It's just a whole kind of a who's who of the top brands that we'll see for sale across Western countries. It's all our stuff.
It's all our stuff.
In fact, if somebody would like to see the complete list of companies and their responses, they're available on the news feed that Johnny sends out as part of the China Watch Radio website and email blast.
So the thing to do is to go to China Watch Radio and check it out and learn.
You can double click into this, exactly.
Okay, Bill Graff, you're up. Are you there?
Oh, yes, I'm here. I'm up. Which one do you want me to do?
Yes, I had you signed up for the... cutting up the passports.
Oh, yeah. Here you go. So now, cutting up passports is always... That's a time-honored way to really mess up somebody's travel, isn't it?
That's for sure.
You can't... if you can't find a passport that is intact and not torn apart... Certainly, you're in real trouble, particularly if you're already in a country and you'd like to leave.
So it's kind of like trying to get out of jail, but you don't have permission slip,
and you don't have the key.
And you don't have the key.
And you don't. And the interesting thing about passports is you might be able to get out of a country with a mutilated passport if you're lucky, but try to get into a country with a mutilated passport.
There you go.
It's almost impossible.
Now,
so it really has to be intact both ways.
Is there any reason why they're cutting up passports?
Well, because they don't want people to leave.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, there you go.
So according to reports coming out of China, the CCP is preventing people from exiting that country. Numerous reports have been shared in social media where individuals attempting to exit China were prevented from doing so, and some of those people just simply had their passports cut in half at the border.
And
the government, Chinese custom?
Yeah.
Yes. The Chinese CCP government officials, if you're flagged in some manner, they don't want you to leave for some reason, they cut your passport in half.
So it doesn't matter what kind of passport, what color.
No, well, Chinese passports.
Chinese passport?
Yeah, Chinese passports.
I'm sure they couldn't cut an American passport. Yeah.
Can they
they could.
The American passport? That's my question.
From what I understand, they're cutting up Chinese passports.
Yeah, that's my understanding as well.
Specifically, if you do not have a very, very good reason to be going someplace. And from the indications that I've read, you have to be going someplace to make more money to bring it back. Because if you're taking money out of the country, you're taking money away from China.
And that dovetails with what we've been talking about, Michael, in recent shows about the fact that the Chinese economy is not doing very well.
That would be a good indication that something's up.
Horrible. I just got last night talked to a person in Shanghai. Actually, they were talking about lockdown. Right now, it's much worse. Yeah, people can't get out at all from their house. They get a little food, some food distributed, but they just can't get out. Also, lots of massive layoffs. One of my cousin and got laid off. So I said, what is he going to do? He have a 10,000 yuan mortgage every month. And now they give 3,000 yuan just for the basic...
unemployment or something?
Yeah. And
so that person's 7,000 yuan in the hole?
Yeah, so he didn't know what to do now. He's not the only one. And lots of young people,
millions.
Probably 45 or something his age, that group of people. Everybody, they just...
Meanwhile, they're transferring essentially, unfortunately, slave labor out of Xinjiang province to fill roles in factories where they apparently don't care so much if that particular population contracts the virus.
They don't have
well,
to
one
pay.
of the things I read on our know before you go to the show segment is the fact that the scope of forced labor is bigger than we thought.
It was. That's true, Billy.
Okay, Alexander.
No. I just wanted to add what Amy was talking about with and the dystopia we were talking about a couple China talks ago, and that is I was looking in The Economist, and one of the illustrations actually showed the lockdown, and it showed how Chinese citizens were in their apartments locked in with drones flying right outside their windows, looking straight into the apartments, and it's truly horrifying. That
with bullhorns.
Exactly.
But wait a minute, this is just Shanghai.
Yeah.
Wait till we hear about what's going on in Xinjiang. Going to be really freaky. One of the things that have a couple of minutes before our break, and when we go pick up Nury Turkel, whose new book, No Escape, will freeze you in your tracks. What I saw when I was watching videos of China was the Dabai,
Big white.
the big whites, and the extent to which the big whites now run everything. And if you are flagged as being positive with COVID, they come and take you away, and then the Dabai come into your house and fumigate it. They're fumigating everything.
Yeah.
And they're fumigating it with a substance that is said to be carcinogenic.
Of course.
And they're spraying it on the streets and on the buildings and everywhere.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
Everywhere. So that's what we're looking at today. And today we're going to focus on one part of China. We're going to look to the west of China, to Xinjiang, and see what happened there and what is happening, and ask Nury Turkel, if there is no escape, then what? What are we going to do? This is China Watch Radio. Today we've got a big show for you. We have a very special guest, Nury Turkel, coming to us from Virginia, in his book, No Escape, The True Story of China's Genocide of the Uyghurs. And Nury is a commissioner with the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom. So this is going to be one very interesting conversation, and we ask you this question. Is China a prison? Wow. Do stay tuned. We will be back after these messages.
Satisfy your hunger with a fresh, prepared, twice-daily grab-and-go sushi you'll find waiting for you at Sushi Market Sprouts, 2 blocks from the beach at 300 7th Avenue in Santa Cruz. Fresh, delicious, and oh so good.
Hello, I'm Junko, and I look forward to serving you at the Sushi Market Sprouts.
Historically high gas prices, rising crime, unsecure borders, and this insane inflation. Are you done yet with the Biden progressive policies? Jimmy Panetta supports them all. Let's break up the Panetta-Pelosi team. Hello, I'm Dalila, and I'm running for Congress to help stop these progressive policies that are hurting all of us and our families. When you vote for me, you're voting for a fighter in Congress. So on June 7th, vote Dalila, D-A-L-I-L-A, for Congress.com. I'm Dalila Epperson, and I approve this message.
David Welch here with the Capitola Coast Lions Club, and a chance for you to sample a wonderful slate of great Santa Cruz restaurants for only $30. And all proceeds go to local charities. Walk with the Capitola Coast Lions Club the evening of June 1st for Santa Cruz Restaurant Walk. For tickets, go to eventbrite.com and search for Santa Cruz Restaurant Walk. Again, Wednesday, June 1st. Tickets available through everbright.com. Tickets available through eventbrite.com and search for Santa Cruz Restaurant Walk. Yum.
Spring is in the air, and that means it's time for...
What, allergies? Easter bunnies?
No, Charlie. It's time for electrical safety.
Of course. Hello, Charlie Friedman here with Chris Jensen from JM Electric. Spring is the season for safety.
That's right, Charlie. Every year, thousands are injured or killed by electricity around the home. But thankfully, we now have incredible technologies today, like arc fault circuit interrupters and tamper-resistant receptacles that can protect you from those electrical fires and shocks. JM Electric is happy to help folks out with a free home assessment to see if any of these devices or our current safe testing services are a good fit for their home.
Don't get a free tap dancing lesson from your electrical circuitry. Give my friends at JM Electric a call. They'll come to your home, have an expert look at your electrical systems, and tell you what can be done to make your your home safe, just like they did for my home. And their visit won't cost you a dime. Give JM Electric a call at 422-7819 or visit jmelectric.com or on Facebook and tell them Charlie sent you.
At Batteries Plus, we do more than fix phones and tablets. We help our neighbors power their lives. Visit Batteries Plus in-store, curbside, and online to save on boat, RV, and motorcycle batteries. For offer details and limitations, visit batteriesplus.com.
Franz Kafka said, "My guiding principle is that guilt is never to be doubted." Join me, Michael Olson, Saturday at 9 a.m. as the Food Chain host, Food and Water Watch Research Director Amanda Starbuck, for a conversation about the use of guilt to entrench factory meat. Will our guilt force us to eat the elite's guilt-free meat? It's you and me for some What's Eating What, Saturday at 9 a.m. on the Food Chain.
What day was that?
We are back. This is China Watch Radio. Today we have a full complement of, I guess, panelists. There's 7 pots on this board, and they're all lit up red, which means we have 7 panelists doing this one show, although one is a guest. And he is Nury Turkel, who's coming to us from Virginia with a brand new book, just off the press. It's called No Escape, the true story of China's genocide of the Uyghurs. Nury, I've introduced you already as a commissioner for the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom. You wrote a book. It's called No Escape. Why did you call it No Escape?
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, panelists. I was listening to the opening conversation. I appreciate you contributing and shining a spotlight on what's described as, correctly, the worst humanitarian crisis that the world has seen since the Holocaust at this level. I call my book, I put a title, No Escape, for 2 reasons. One, I was born in a re-education camp, and I thought that after coming to the United States, becoming a U.S. citizen, establishing a professional life in Washington, D.C. as a lawyer, and having a family, being able to travel around the world, not only with one passport, two types of passport. I thought that I would never talk about the way that the Chinese Communist Party has been treating the Uyghur people in the past 5-6 decades, or as long as I can remember, as long as I can breathe. That's one reason that I thought that the Uyghurs have not been able to escape the repression. And then the other reason is more personal. As I noted that I'm an American citizen, naturalized U.S. citizen. I came here as a student and granted asylum, and I have a very gratifying professional, personal life. And I'm an American, and I should be able to speak without being fearful of a foreign government. And I should not be able to subject to transnational repression. And I should not be subject to a family members taken hostage by a regime in Beijing. So I also feel, along with the other Uyghurs, that I've never been able to escape. Even right now, as we speak, I'm sure that somebody's listening, taking notes. So I'm physically free as an American, as a free person, as a free member of the free world, and yet I'm not that free. So I don't feel that I have been able to escape. I'm just laughing through the tears.
Laughing through the tears. Well, Nury, you brought up something with respect to China that a lot of people have heard about, but not many people know about. And that is the Cultural Revolution and its impact on just about most all Chinese. Our own Amy Howe here went through the Cultural Revolution and was sent to re-education camps herself.
Yeah, 1969.
69.
Yeah.
And so, first of all, I think we've all heard about the Uyghurs, but we don't know why the Chinese don't like the Uyghurs. Why don't the Chinese like the Uyghurs?
That's a great question. There are a number of ways to explain this. Even though Chinese Communist Party has its own narrative, justification. China has 5 autonomous regions. Previous speakers have called the region as province. It's not a province. The official name is Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. With that name, with the autonomy laws, with the Chinese constitution, with the propaganda materials, the Chinese should be allowing the Uyghurs to be a Uyghur, allowing them to practice their religion that is perceived as a foreign religion by the communist regime in Beijing.
Well, just a minute,
just to give you a minute,
Nury.
Yeah.
The Chinese Communist Party doesn't want anybody to practice religion. Not the Buddhists, not the Christians, not anybody.
No, they when they started in power in 1949, and they take Xinjiang province and also the Tibet, Xizang, and they call the peaceful resolution. So it was allow them to practice their religion or lots of things. That's the beginning. That's what reached the resolution. So they
said
peaceful.
They said they were going to, but they didn't. So what happened then?
I will explain to you. There's a little bit of a different take on that particular point. So let's start with the geopolitical reason. Xi Jinping has this project. They call it Belt and Road Initiative.
Belt and Road, right?
Yeah.
Did we lose you, Nury? Uh-oh.
Sounds like you lost him right when he was going to explain what's going on in China.
Very important.
Well, hopefully Nury will call back on a landline, and we'll do better with him. Maybe I can have David track him down, have him call in on that landline, 479-1080. So the subject is Xinjiang.
You know, one of the things that came to mind discussing the CCP's quote-unquote tolerance of religions was visiting a Buddhist temple somewhere north of Beijing in 1999. We were given some very rudimentary tour of the place. It seemed that it was only sort of tolerated because it was a tourist attraction. And they showed us at one point the library. Here's the library. There was several shelves on the walls, and I think there was one book.
You know whose book?
Yeah, Mao's Little Red Book, probably, right?
Yeah, I mean, I had the distinct impression that they had...
old Xi Jinping's book. I just can't believe it.
Isn't that interesting how...
He had more than Mao. I'm not kidding you.
Wow.
Yeah. You went to the...
Tell us the difference. Start with Chairman Mao's Little Red Book.
Red Book, yeah. Little quotation book.
Mm-hmm. And it was everywhere.
They have 4 values, Mao's. So everybody to study. That's the only book. And now Xi Jinping have probably 40 or more. Because you go to one of the only Chinese bookstore in Chinatown here, San Francisco. They bought it, and
go ahead.
They bought the bookstore. So I went in. I went
the CCP bought the book?
Yeah. Before they have the book from Hong Kong, from Taiwan, from mainland, everything. Right. So free speech, right? And I know the owner. And then he passed away, so he sold to somebody, and they CCP bought it. They said, everything. Xi Jinping's. I didn't know he has so many books.
Well, he probably has a great stable of writers.
No, he's thinking he has a new thoughts. It's like better than the Mao Zedong thoughts. Okay. Before they say that everybody, whole nation, one thought, not just one country, one party, and now it's one thought.
One thought.
Yeah, one thought.
Xi Jinping
thought.
And so, Michael, it occurs to me this is becoming less of a joke and more ominous to me that right when he was going to explain what he was going to explain, he got cut off.
Yeah.
I mean, this is,
yeah.
it wasn't really a coincidence to me.
Well, yeah,
Wow.
he came in on. We were having trouble with the Opal, and we thought it was like the wind noise or something like
You
that.
think the CCP control Opal?
I don't know. You know what? Here's what I do know. I don't think CCP owns Opal, but I think the CCP has captured so many of America's elites that they can pull levers and get things done from their friends, from the people that they have captured.
Yeah.
Well, Opal is a program that's owned and sold by the Comrex Corporation, which is the same company that I'm using and most of our remotes use for everything we do.
Yeah.
And I hope the head of that corporation or somebody high up has not been captured. Would not bode well for remotes across the United States because a lot of stations use this equipment.
Well, given the nature of the internet, you don't have to have influence over the owners of a business in order to interrupt a connection.
A call.
Yeah, but just for the benefit of our audience, I'm using the exact same technology that our guest was using when his signal apparently died. Now, I mean, it could just be the internet being funky, but it is a little odd. I do hope we get him back soon. Is David looking into that?
We're trying.
Okay.
It is interesting though that right when he was going to get to the meat of the call, off he went.
Yeah.
It's a very large coincidence.
Yeah.
Okay, we've got him on a landline now, so
Interfering.
So we'll
Long
see
time.
what kind of trouble we can get him in here. So I'm going to.
Maybe we're the China Watch programs on CCP's radar.
Well, this situation in the situation with the Uyghurs is really it's hard to believe that this is actually happening in our contemporary world. It's easy to have a sort of naive sense that this sort of thing belongs in history books, but here we are.
And here we have Nury back. Nury, are you there?
Difficulty. I'm calling from the regular phone line.
And you know what? You sound much better, so it's perfect.
Oh, it's great. It's great.
Good.
So going back to the several reasons that I was trying to explain and share with your listeners. One is more geopolitical reason. The China, Xi Jinping in particular, has this China Dream Project, Belt and Road Initiative. When you look at the Uyghur Homeland, that sits in a large piece of land. As one of the panelists earlier said, it's the size of Texas, 4 times the size of California. It has over 600 miles international border. It provides a gateway to Eurasian markets, Eurasian natural resources. And now the Russia and the United States in their backyard, and it also has a security interest that has been an exercise through Shanghai Cooperation Organization. So that's one piece. The other piece is political economy. As one of the earlier panelists also mentioned, the forced labor aspect, political, economical significance of the Uyghur homeland. So based on various credible reports that we've been able to get access to, much of it was on open source, available on Chinese websites, that the researchers in UK and the United States and Congress profiled the modern-day slavery. That prompted Congress compelled Congress to pass this legislation, Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act, last December. That China is using the Uyghur homeland, Uyghur people, to solve the labor shortage. There's a strong political, economic aspect. That also have been seen in the technology. They have been tested the surveillance techniques in the Uyghur homeland. The Uyghurs called East Turkestan, and it has been successful, and they are in the process of exporting it. And then the next reason possibly is political. That may not be exactly the type of concern a reasonable government, responsible government would do, because there's no an ongoing or organized separatist movement within the region. The outside Uyghur dissident groups, political organizations demanding independent East Turkestan is a separate matter, but there's no reason for China to build this, establish or build this expensive surveillance, militarization, even there's no a looming political threat. So the Chinese think that if the Uyghur homeland gets out of hand, it may have a domino effect. As we know that the people are not talking about Tibet as the way that they do. Hong Kong democracy, Hong Kong autonomy is gone. The only other political threat that the Chinese may think is to Taiwan. So this political self-made enemy in the Uyghurs really don't make any sense. And then finally, the loyalty test and kind of racist aspect of the Chinese policy makers, thinkers, and enforcers. When you listen to their message, it's quite disturbing. They use something like, we are helping Uyghurs to turn into a normal human being. This was the message put out by the Chinese embassy in Washington. So essentially, the Communist Party sets the standard for who is normal, who is not. So essentially, they are helping Uyghurs to convert into normal human beings. The reason being just being Uyghur, just being Muslim. The Uyghur ethnic identity has been perceived as a political threat for the Chinese state for quite a long time. As one of the panelists said earlier, Uyghurs have always been treated as others because of their physical appearance, because of their history, because of their language, because of their culture, and connection to the other Eurasian people that goes all the way to the borders of Europe. If you consider the former Ottoman territories, so that's ethnic identity is a huge problem, perceived problem to the Chinese. And then finally, the Uyghur religion is perceived as a sign of disloyalty to the communist ideology. Is the Uyghurs always been treated like this because of their ethnic and religious identity? There's some period, as I articulated or as I describe in my book, especially during the Huyaobang era, the Uyghurs were allowed to build mosques. I witnessed that in my place of birth, Kashgar. And I went to a Uyghur language only high school, elementary school, and even a university teaching language. The language, the medium used in the university level then was also Uyghur. So, and there is no political problem. So this makes me always wonder, why would they do these to buy themselves, create even more problems? As you know, the societies that respect religious freedom, human rights, naturally have a stability. But for the Chinese, these identities, ethnic identity, religious practices, way of life, spirituality, perceived as not only existing threats or looming threat, this is something that will destroy the CCP. So that's why you hear things like preemptive policing. It's almost like a Tom Cruise movie, Minority Report. Somebody in the Communist Party thinks that you're problematic. You have a political ideology, separatist thoughts, or you have a different way of worshiping the God. You're supposed to worship Xi Jinping. One of the individuals that I interviewed in my book, Camp Survivors, Mihrugul Tursun, told me that when she was asked, you have to say, when the guards asked them in the morning, who's new God? You have to say Xi Jinping. Who saved your life? You have to say Communist Party. So this is the type of thing that they're focusing on. When you look at the type of people that they locked up, you'd be surprised by the percentage of the Uyghur elites, social elites, intellectual, Uyghur intellectuals, business leaders, community leaders, religious leaders. And also you would be surprised how much they are targeting the pious Uyghurs. So they need to cut off the source of inspiration, a source of education, source of leadership in the society, and the kind of role models. And on the other hand, they're cutting off all the spirituality. So I will stop after this. I work in the International Religious Freedom Commission. Mm-hmm. The way that I do my job is to go around the world, specifically those countries, close to 30 countries, that are in the pocket of the Chinese government. That includes countries like Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, Iran, all the stands in Central Asia, Cuba, North Korea, Venezuela. I have not been to all of it, but the message that I go tell them is, look, it's not that something that the people on the ground, whether it be Han Chinese people, the Tibetans, and others, creating this atmosphere. Now I will call what you're describing is earlier in those 41 cities, Xinjiang in China. So this is this government is fearful of its own people. This is what is the problem. This government is fearful of their own sense of security. They're crushing other people's sense of security to secure their insecurity. So it's actually quite basic, and this is something that the American people are not understanding. What we're dealing is not a normal government. This is a one-party, Communist Party rule system.
This is the autocracy that is the opposite of a republic. And I've often, in doing the China Watch radio show over the last year or so, I've often wondered if the CCP needs an enemy, if they just have to have somebody to be against as a way of survival.
Right.
They was killed a chicken in front of a monkey.
So explain that.
Killed the Chinese old saying.
Okay.
And killed in front of monkey, you kill the chicken, so they all scared. So
okay. So we're looking at an extremely scary situation for the Uyghur people, who are being repressed in a manner that belies the imagination. When you hear about what the CCP did to imprison an entire population of people, and realize that this imprisonment of one people is being used to model the future for the CCP to imprison everybody, all the people in every country.
Nury, in the introduction to your book, you describe a situation where this individual is under extreme physical distress in essentially a sort of a torture chair.
The tiger chair.
Yeah, and this printer goes absolutely crazy printing out names of people, and the police come and look at the names, and they use expletives to describe their reaction, because they're saying, how the heck are we going to find and arrest all of these people? And you go on to intimate after that this arrest list was generated by some sort of artificially intelligent system. I'm absolutely fascinated by this, frightened, of course. But what do you know about this sort of technology that's being used with regards to the oppression?
Thank you for asking that question. The specific platform that they have used is called Yijihua Xitong in Chinese, IJOP, Integrated Joint Operating Platform. I had the pleasure of being featured in a documentary, frontline documentary, The Age of AI. In the beginning of that show, and Mr. Lee, who is considered as one of the top experts on artificial intelligence, said something quite remarkable, which was China is the new Saudi Arabia for personal data. So why did he say that? Why this is the case? In the United States, we know that some companies, Amazon and Facebook, use personal data for commercial purposes. But in China, it's more so for control, social control, behavioral control, family control. And now the technology rightfully pulled out by the U.S. government is enabling and facilitating the ongoing Uyghur genocide. Let me paint a picture for you. Just imagine cameras installed in your home. Police checkpoints pass through to enter grocery stores, pass from neighborhood to neighborhood, and these with two lines, one for ethnic majority, in this case Han Chinese, and the one for the Uyghurs and Kazakhs and others who don't look like the majority. And then you will be automatically treated as a threat to the state. And imagine that you have a QR code on your front door that any police officer can scan to obtain social rating. Score that can be affected by choices, but also like immovable circumstances such as your age. You cannot change your age. And imagine that your every move, seemingly every thought, monitored. The government places like strangers in your home, as I describe in the book, to monitor you, instruct on the state-emphasized values, ideologies, and making your children to spy on you. And imagine that, the government, the government that you're supposed to rely on to protect yourself treats you like a weed. The one quote that I put in the book, this is from the state official in 2018. It goes along the lines of a quote. I will quote that exactly. You cannot uproot all the weeds hidden among the crops in the field one by one. You need to spray chemicals to kill them all. So this is their policy and how they're implementing it. So they use that IJOP starting in 2012 all the way to 2016, letting people to flood in and just to use platforms like WeChat, paying, communicating, booking travels, everything. It's all documented. It's all collected. And then they added DNA samples that American scientist Kenneth Kidd at Yale Medical School played some role in the Chinese Minister of Public Security's research at Yale Medical School.
Well, Nury, we're going to have to take a break. And
yes.
When we come back, we'll pick up this story of how the CCP imprisoned the Uyghur population and the technologies that are being used and the fix that the Uyghur people are in. So this is China Watch Radio. We have a whole cast of characters on the panel. There's 7 of us. Somebody's making a lot of noise with their handset or their microphone. So whoever among us is doing that, please don't do it. When we come back, we're going to have Nury take us to Xinjiang and describe what life is like.
Traffic on southbound Highway 101 south of Coyote Creek Golf Course is slow moving right now for about 3 miles. Highway 156 has slow moving traffic in both directions on the approach to the traffic light at Union Road. Weather forecast for tonight, mostly clear with lows in the 40s. North-northwest wind 10 to 15 miles per hour, becoming light and variable. Winds could gust as high as 31 miles per hour. And tomorrow, sunny with highs a little cooler than today. North-northwest winds 6 to 10 miles per hour with gusts as high as 26 miles per hour. A gale warning has just gone into effect, and that gale warning stays in effect through this evening. Boaters forecast for tonight, northwest winds 20 to 30 knots with gusts up to 35 knots. Wind waves 9 to 11 feet. Southwest swell up to 2 feet at 18 seconds. The time now 6 minutes after 3 p.m., and that means it's time for the second hour of China Watch Radio.
China Watch Radio is brought to you in part by Sushi Market Sprouts on 7th in Santa Cruz and Kaito in the Capitol Mall Food Court. Treat yourself to the finest Japanese cuisine you'll find anywhere with fresh sushi to go and delicious ramen dinners. Sushi Market Sprouts and Kaito. Yum!
Welcome back. This is the second hour of China Watch Radio, and we're so happy that you joined us today on this very special program. We're talking about the Uyghurs of Xinjiang province in China. Now, the Uyghurs are not quite like the rest of most of the Chinese in China, the Han Chinese. The Uyghurs look different. kind of, the more we talk about this, the more frightening it sounds like our past when it gets right down to it. But what the Chinese, what the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, is doing with the Uyghurs is unlike anything anybody has ever done in history, with the possible exception of Chairman Mao, Joseph Stalin, and Adolf Hitler. And what they are doing is positively frightening. Nury, you wrote a book just out called No Escape. Is there no escape for the Uyghurs of China?
I believe that if the international community fails to stop this genocide, two things will happen. The Chinese Communist Party will manage to destroy this proud nation, Uyghurs, with the slow motion death, the ongoing genocide and crimes against humanity. And also, if the international community fails to stop this, then the Genocide Convention become even more meaningless. In the past 10 years alone, the international community have experienced 3 genocides, Yazidis to begin with, and then the Rohingya Muslims, and now the Uyghurs. Not only that, the historical vow, the promise, never again, become even more meaningless. Never again rings shallow today because of the tepid, meandering responses that we have seen in the face of this genocide that rightfully described as the largest incarceration of ethnic and religious minorities since the Holocaust era. There are a lot of reports, credible reports, have been put out, published, but the international community has been still haven't figured out or shown the kind of a political will to stop this. If I may finish the earlier question,
sure.
The IJOP question is very important for 2 reasons. One, using the technology to round up that many people in a short period of time shows the random, arbitrary nature of this collective punishment.
We're talking about 17,000 people in 10 days.
Yes, and there are villagers. The irony is that this was actually part of the China cable that was released through IJIC, International Consortium on Investigative Journalism, led by Bethany Allen Ibrahimian. It is consistent with the story that I've been told myself during the process of writing this book. So what happened was that the IJOP ordered the police to round up 20,000. And they could not locate it. They got frustrated. And then they were managed to round up 17,000 people. Based on that, that random, arbitrary nature, you can tell why we have this a staggering number of people being sent to the camp. The Pentagon believes 3 million. If you even listen to the Chinese,
wow.
Chinese
3 million people?
Yes. Yeah, Randall Schreiber, who served as Assistant Secretary of Defense in the Trump administration, told twice. The first time was in a press conference, second time in a public event. He reiterated that the U.S. government believes that there are around 3 million Uyghurs been locked up. But if you're doubtful about that, just to listen to the Chinese government's own public statements. In a white paper published by the Chinese government, they bragged about they said 1.3 million Uyghurs and others have been subject to re-education or went through a re-education program since 2015. This white paper was published in 2021. So if you add them up, we're talking about 6-7 million people been subject to re-education, quote-unquote re-education. That is a soft version of the human re-engineering that they've forced these Uyghurs and others to go through.
Well, so our own Amy Howe has been through the re-education camps, and they failed.
She was not a good student.
She was not a good student.
Finally escape. But it's just a very narrow gap escape. It's a no escape. I totally understand that her entire China is like bigger present.
Yeah.
You're talking to another person who has also not only survived that camp, but also speaking about this 50 years later. So, Michael, you asked me about, why do they do this? If I may take a few minutes to explain how this started and how it's happening, and why should we be worried about it? So essentially, the Chinese Communist Party, as I noted, sees the Uyghurs' vibrant religious practices, unique culture, ethnic pride as a sign of disloyalty to the state and party, and also see that as a future source of future unrest and threat to a quote-unquote national unity. And in order to justify that self-created enemy or the hostility stemming from the CCP leadership, they come up with this thing called three evil forces. They constantly and in a battle against three evil forces: separatism, terrorism, and extremism. Post 9/11 international community made it even easier for them. As I noted, there's no organized separatist movement within China. Since 2015, even before Xi Jinping appointed this Chinese official from Tibet to Xinjiang in 2016, it was already turned into a police state. So there was no need to set up or securitize the region or enhancing or in putting in place that many security apparatus.
Okay, but before you proceed, back up just a little bit. And you talked about Tibet. And it's in your book, you talk about how Tibet was the proving ground for this process of denationalizing people. Right.
So in 2014, there's a media report, some incidents took place in China. Xi Jinping is interested going to Xinjiang. So he goes to Xinjiang and then shakes hands with people, takes pictures with the babies. And then this was also reported. He felt annoyed that the Uyghur people still speaking their language, still going, enjoying sort of their way of life. And he was very, being a nationalist leader, being almost a chauvinist leader of China. He didn't like it. And then he appoints this person. This guy has been in the news a lot. His name is Chen Quanguo. He was party secretary in Tibet until August 2016. New Yorker magazine had a piece last year, a long future story. When he was appointed, he took his own security details from Lhasa to Urumqi and then settled down in a former military hotel. That hotel turned into a command center with giant TV screens, and he worked in that compound, which is also out of ordinary. Usually the Communist Party leadership lives in this protected compound. He can do essentially anything. The party secretary is the top official in Xinjiang or any other Chinese-controlled regions or provinces. So he comes in, and then in 2016-17 April, right around the time that Donald Trump becomes president, right around the time that Xi Jinping is received by Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago, Chen Quanguo announced the implementation of something called de-extremification measures of 2017. That's the name of that measure. So essentially that made 48 behaviors: growing beard, adhering to Islamic lifestyle, wearing wheel, abstention from sex, drug, alcohol.
Wait a minute. Did you say abstention from sex, drugs, and alcohol? You mean not having sex is a law?
No, they use something. What they will say is that if you abstain from all the things that people do, that you have displayed signs of extremism. The name of this measure is extremist. It's supposed to eradicate extremist ideas. So if you're a female state employee, goes to this evening dining parties, dining events, and if you refuse to drink, you will be in trouble. If you stop your children to have a relationship, that's where that abstention kicks in, with a non-Han Chinese, non-Uyghur individual, i.e. the Han Chinese individual. Because there's a state policy of forcing people, incentivizing people to enter into marriage with Han Chinese individuals. So that's the state policy. So that makes it, if you refuse to, hang up because of your parents' urging, I cannot be too specific, explicit, essentially your mom, your dad, by interfering in your relationship with non-Uyghur individual, non-Muslim individual, can get you a label that is extremist. So this has been discussed in public and written. Several journalists have written about this, and through the leaked documents, through China cable, government procurement documents, satellite imagery, harrowing stories of survivors since 2017 revealed the massive prison system that the Chinese have built. CNN, BBC had some of the Western media organizations had a before-after the construction images online that you can see the massive and expensive nature of the prison camps. Around that time, and Xi Jinping called for all-out struggle against terrorism, infiltration, and separatism. Infiltration means that no foreign individuals, including myself, to be able to go there. And listen to this, using the organs of dictatorship and showing absolute no mercy. When Xi Jinping said something like that, and then echoed by Chen, saying things like, round up everyone who should be round up, that becomes a state policy. Something that the American people don't understand. In China, there's no political debate. When they were formulating, or when they're enforcing, there's no political dissent. There's no free media. There's no Michael to have a radio program to discuss issues. So once the supreme leader, once the fearless Xi Jinping or his enforcer Chen says something, that becomes policy. And then there's also something very important that your listeners might be interested. So when you talk about these camps, when you read about these camps, be mindful, these are the concentration camp type of prison system set up, copying essentially Nazi concentration camps. In my book, I mentioned a historian who studies or documented history of the concentration camps. I had a chance to interview her. Her name is Andrea Pitzker. The reason myself reaching out to her and reading her book is I wanted to find out what is this? Is this a re-education camp or vocational training centers? Or is it something like where I was born in 1970? Or is it something very unique? And my conclusion is based on the official lines. For example, this is the official line. It says, this is part of the leaked document. Chen directed, this guy, party secretary, directed that these centers teach like a school, be managed like the military, and be defended like a prison. And the goal of these policies is to break the lineage, break the roots, break the connections, and break the origins. So this statement itself gives you an idea that this is so much similar to, this is one of my surprises during the process of writing this book. There's so much similarities between the Nazi camps and the current Xi Jinping camps. But I might also clarify this. The camps that I was born, and also through my research and writing, I find that it's much more closer to the system that Stalin's Gulag, the world has seen. So
Nury,
just a sec, Nury. Okay, let's take first John T. and then Amy.
Okay.
Nury, there's a chapter in your book titled "How to Delete a Culture." And I do want to mention for our audience really quickly, go to ChinaWatchRadio.com. The top article there has got links to purchase a copy of Nury's extraordinary book, No Escape, The True Story of China's Genocide of the Uyghurs. It's one of the things that we can do to help this situation is to educate ourselves. So I highly recommend this book. It really is incredible. Yep. Now, in the chapter called How to Delete a Culture, you describe how there's this gentleman had been tracking using Google Earth the destruction of mosques, including the Kargalik Grand Mosque, which was built sometime in the 1500s. It was really an incredible piece of architecture, from what I understand. It's something like 10,000 to 15,000 mosques that have been destroyed. So I'm saying that in part because I want our audience to get a sort of a taste here of. Could you explain to me what? Well, I should actually add one last thing, and sorry if I go on too long here, but the United Nations defines genocide, amongst other things, as deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part. So that being the context, can you explain for the benefit of our audience how the culture of the Uyghurs is being deleted?
That's a great question. I'm glad that you reminded me to discuss two things. One, why this is a genocide, and the other is, again, similarities to what the Hitler did to the Jewish people. A few years ago, when Behram Sintash, this researcher, published this report, late columnist for the Washington Post, Fred Hyatt, recently passed away, wrote a column on Washington Post that you can still have access to. Every day is Kristallnacht for the Uyghur people in China. Those of us who's a student of history know what Kristallnacht means. Why is it such a significant term that people still use it? So what the Fred Hyatt, being a Jewish American, he saw the resemblance right away and wrote that piece. When you look at the way the severity, the scope of the destructive policies, not only on the Uyghur people's lives, body and soul, their cities, their township, their places of worship, even cemeteries have been bulldozed. One of the camp survivors, Zumrat Dawood, was telling me some graphic details of her brother's tombstone. Not only be removed, but his body, the bones, put in a bag and give it to them to have a different burial site. So they kept the bone in the bag on the roof because they were like feeling that they've been around. It's creepy. It's hard to even explain that. So they're bulldozing the cemeteries, and they are turning in some of the mosque bathrooms, the bathroom that the Muslim men and women wash themselves, into public toilets. They're also bulldozing some of the places of worship into theme parks. Hilton Hotels reportedly building a hotel in the southern city of Hotan on a previously cemetery site. So this is still ongoing destructive policies. And then as for the genocide, as you pointed out, three key legal requirements for calling atrocities as a genocide. One, deliberate, purposeful destruction of a group of people in part or whole. When the think tankies, people in the think tank, and some of the academics still discussing whether or not this is a genocide on the notion, based on the thinking that China has not shown the intention to wipe out these people. Hitler never did. Brought in cameras and reporters to show he is happily destroying 6 million Jews. We find out about it, even though we knew some of it, the international community, after the crime is committed. So perpetrators, as I pointed out in my book, in the case of communist China, they reinvented the genocide. They added the technical aspect, technology aspect. They added the slavery aspect. They also find a gray area in the law. They knew that people will be discussing the intention. Therefore, they kicked out all the journalists out of China. They are confiscating Uyghur people's passports so they cannot leave the country. They have to stay and get suffocated if they did not end up being in a camp. So the intention is very clear. If the death is slow motion, If the death is unknown as today, then the intention can be established. I have a training as a lawyer. I'm trained as a lawyer. I'm not an international lawyer. I'm an anti-corruption, anti-bribery lawyer, but this is not that difficult. And then the second piece involves children. The purposeful transfer of children from one group to another group is one of the key legal requirements of genocide. Based on credible reports, at least 800,000 Uyghur children, this is reported in the New York Times, have been forcibly separated from their families and placed in state-run orphanages. And This American Life and NPR had a father based in Istanbul who recognized his son in a TikTok state-run orphanage promotional video. Just let that sink in. You recognize your disappeared son in a government-run propaganda material on a social media. It is heart-wrenching. As a father of two young kids, I cannot fathom that.
And the forced sterilizations as well, right?
And then the other piece is also remarkably brutal and need to be talked about every day, which is targeted attack on Uyghur women through gang rape in prison, in the concentration camps, and also forced sterilization. One of my interviewees, the Uyghur woman that I interviewed, actually two of them, told me that they went through a forced sterilization, and they were given this mysterious pill, cocktail. To this day, we still don't know what it is. So as a result, the Chinese regime imposed forced abortion and forced sterilization at the scale that the world has not seen in recent memory, resulting in staggering 60% drop in the birth rate in just 2 years. So, and then on top of that, the other policies also...
That's a 60% drop in the Uyghur birth rate.
Birth rate, yeah. So,
and also, on top of that, there's another... This is a day rape. Just people need to talk about it. I want politicians to scream from the rooftop. There's also something else, the forced marriage, preventing Uyghurs from starting family within the ethnic group, and also taking those young women and men into the concentration camp to make it impossible for them to get married. And also the policy is also incentivizing ethnic Han Chinese men to marry Uyghur women. There are 30 million, apparently, Chinese men looking for a wife. And also Uyghur women have always been, because of their looks, been treated as a sex object. I've seen it myself. I've experienced myself. And also, these Uyghur women cannot say no. There's a video clips being circulated. When you look at the face, if this kind of marriage, like the way that it happens in the United States based on love and affection, I think people should stay out of it. And that's a beautiful thing. But this is a state-sponsored, enforced marriage that no Uyghur woman can say no. So how much time do I have to give you all of it?
Well, we're going to take a break right now, Nury, but when we come back, we'll have a whole nother half hour, and we've got questions for you. This is China Watch Radio. We're talking today with Nury Turkel, the author of No Escape, The True Story of China's Genocide of the Uyghurs. Right back.
Satisfy your hunger with a fresh, prepared, twice-daily grab-and-go sushi you'll find waiting for you at Sushi Market Sprouts, 2 blocks from the beach at 300 7th Avenue in Santa Cruz. Fresh, delicious, and oh so good.
Hello, I'm Junko, and I look forward to serving you at the Sushi Market Sprouts.
Justin Patterson for Monterey County Sheriff on June 7th. As our sheriff, Justin Patterson will protect our small businesses from COVID-style shutdowns and lockdowns. He understands that every business is essential and has a right to stay open, serve its customers, and pay its employees. As our sheriff, Justin Patterson will defend the Second Amendment and your right to protect your home and business from criminals. As our sheriff, Justin Patterson will work to increase the number of deputies on patrol by 50%. That means a deputy at your door when you need one. As our sheriff, Justin Patterson will address the homeless crisis in a constructive yet compassionate manner. And as our sheriff, Justin Patterson will restore law and order to Monterey County so that everyone, no matter where you live, has a safe neighborhood, a safe school, and a peaceful community. On June 7th, vote for the candidate with 21 years of hands-on law enforcement experience in the sheriff's office. Vote for Justin Patterson for sheriff.
This is Justin Patterson, and I approve this message.
At Batteries Plus, we do more than fix phones and tablets. We help our neighbors power their lives. Visit Batteries Plus in-store, curbside, and online for fast and reliable phone and tablet repair. Learn more at batteriesplus.com.
Hello, everybody. This is Dave Michaels with your Longevity Product Update. This time, I want to tell you about Arthrodex. Arthrodex is the easiest way to make sure that your pet supplements with all the stuff they need, including minerals, vitamins, amino acids, glucosamine, and digestive enzymes. Cats and dogs love it for the flavor because it's made using beef gelatin, and owners love it because they know it's easy to use and doesn't leave a big mess. Arthrodex is good for all pets and has no wheat, corn, or soy. It has only 30 calories per serving and has no artificial flavors or preservatives. The best thing, though, about Arthrodex is that it works. As our pets get older, they get achy joints, digestive problems, skin problems. Arthrodex can help them feel better. To get your paws on Arthrodex, log on to kscohealth.com or call 831-218-5726. That's 831-218-KSCO or log on to kscohealth.com.
If you think things couldn't get any worse, think again. We're all now in completely uncharted territory, all of us, from the entire COVID-19 scenario to covert climate engineering operations in our skies to unfolding ecological collapse around the world. Converging catastrophes are closing in from countless directions. What cards will the controllers play next? Tune into the commercial-free, non-political Global Alert News Hour, Saturday mornings at 8 a.m. on KSCO 1080 AM. This is Dane Wigington from geoengineeringwatch.org.
We are back, and we have a little bit of time to cover so much territory with Nury Turkel, who is the author of The No Escape, No Way Out. You're in prison. You can't get out. There is no escape, and they're watching you every minute of the day. You think George Orwell was weird. Wow. Amy, go ahead.
Yes, Nury, I have two questions for you. First question is, you say that you were born in a re-education camp. Where and when?
I was born in a re-education camp in the city of Kashgar.
Oh, Xingjian.
Which is in the heart of Central Asia, a cradle of Uyghur civilization. Has been perceived as a hotbed for Uyghur nationalism by the communist regime. I was born and raised after I was released from the camp until I finished high school in the same city.
Oh, so the second question, I don't know, you heard about that. 1975, in Yunnan province, one of a Muslim the county, and they have like a rebelling uprising against the CCP, but that what happened is a bigger tragedy because I was there in Yunnan province in re-education camp. So I went to that county, and people don't want to talk about it. It's because in China it's all propaganda. You don't know anything what's happening, right? So my father was adopted by a Muslim family. So I joined the Muslim canteen in the school, the campus. So I met lots of Muslims. So they told me the real story. And so after the uprising, the reason is, they, just like you said, that they did lots of bad things against the religion, Islamic religion. They even let raise the pigs in their cemeteries. So that's on the ground of their mosque, And one, why is just one lich and caused this fire is one little teenage girl, about 17 years old, and the village caught fire. So he went back to where her grandma was stay in the house, but he didn't to save his grandma. Her grandma, he saved the mouse pictures, took a mouse picture out, so they make her hero, national hero, and also make her as the head of the village, and doing whatever communists want him to do against the Muslims. And see, Mao is more important than your grandma. We're not even talk about Allah. So that kind of thing. And I saw that's raised in the uprising. And the end, I think the whole village, they don't want to surrender. So they killed about 350 children and about 2,000 adults. And about 10,000 people was injured. They sent the Liberation Army, just surrounded the village, killed everybody.
What a story.
That's in 1975, July. I still remember that.
David Welch.
Yeah, Nury, I want to compliment you on your book. In the radio program here so far, we've talked in kind of broad terms. But I've noticed in the book itself, you've got a lot of very specific examples and testimonies that back up some of the claims that we've made on the show. So I encourage folks to take a look at that book. Could you help me just understand for a minute, and the rest of the radio audience, the scope and scale that we're talking about here? We mentioned specifically about 3 million people that were in internment camps, re-education camps used as forced labor. But kind of beyond that, how many Uyghurs are we talking about, and how large is the control over that population?
Thank you very much for your a nice feedback. And you mentioned something very important. There have been a lot of books written, academic field, about the historical aspect, the human rights aspect, the cultural aspect. But this is arguably the first book ever written when the actual genocide is taking place. The information is so restricted, and it's very difficult to go there myself because I was sanctioned by the Chinese state last year for the work that I'm doing for the American people through my job at the U.S. government, and then also other areas in the human rights field. So the only way to do this is to have years-long interviews with people, like all over the world. So I, as being somebody who trained in a legal profession, I enjoyed doing the research, even though the information that I collected was so disturbing, to the extent it's so hard to even listen. As for the size, in late 2018, 2019 period, there were two pieces of information put out to the public. One was by Reuters. It's called Tracking China's Muslim Gulag. There's a interactive map available to show before, after the images of those camps. The conclusion was that the world has not seen anything like this scale, this magnitude since the Holocaust era, particularly rounding up an ethnic and religious minority. You may recall that Secretary Pompeo regularly used that line. Members of Congress from both parties. Even Secretary Blinken was telling CBS 60 Minutes that the United States government does not see eye to eye on many issues, including that there's not millions of terrorists in China. So the one quick anecdote, the size of the camp, one time I was told by researchers, and this was published, the expansion rate was the size of 150 soccer fields in a short period of time. This is a massive prison system. And I do agree that this prison system is expanding to other parts of China. You don't have to be in a concentration camp type of system that the Chinese authorities set up in Xinjiang. But the home confinement is something that is so become a normal for ordinary people. Now with this contact tracing. This is why I've been asked to comment on the lockdown. I always said, welcome to the world of the Uyghurs. When the Chinese people did not pay attention and then looked the other way, thinking that this is just a matter for the Uyghurs to worry about. I feel so awfully bad for the Chinese population in those 40-some cities that they have to deal with this open-air prison system.
Along that exact line of thinking, you mentioned in your book, I'm going to actually just read a short excerpt from, it's China's burgeoning model of capitalism without democracy will appeal to many authoritarian rulers and will come to shape the ideological struggle of the coming century. I found that a really extraordinary piece of illuminatory writing. What do you see as the core tenets of that ideological struggle?
Before that's an important question. Can I just mention that in August 2018, the size of the expansion in one specific area tripled, more than 1 million square meters. That is roughly the 140 soccer fields. That's how massive, how rapidly it was expanded. So, as for your question, there's an infamous document called Number 9 Johua Wenjian, which was initially Xi Jinping's speech that was leaked out and now it's public. In that document, as well as the previous propaganda statements, there's something repeatedly been mentioned, which is constant battle against Western influence. That Western influence, that fear, essentially based on the notion that Western influence comes with freedom of religion, freedom of thought, freedom of speech, and freedom of press. That is up against what the CCP stands for. So instead of saying that we are out there to protect the CCP interests for the domestic consumption as well as justification of those policies, they created this new governance model that you rely on the government, you rely on the surveillance, and also you make a handful of people so rich while creating this Orwellian system that I called Brave New World in my book. Essentially, you make people to live in something combination of North Korea and the United States at the same time. A Chinese novelist, Yang Lianke, said this in 2018. What he meant was the system is so Orwellian because of CCP leadership's sense of insecurity. They make people to be fearful that anyone and no one should be thinking that they are free of being in the custody of the CCP if they go against the CCP interest. After that atmosphere created, they allow some Chinese individuals to become so rich, like this guy who was in the book, Desmond Shum, the author of Red Roulette, who made a friend with Wen Jiabao's wife and then built and run the logistical hub at the Beijing Capital Airport. He was one of the beneficiaries of the system until his wife disappeared, ex-wife disappeared in the camp. So people like him, people like the Jack Ma and the people who owns the Huawei, ZTE, Hikvision, SenseTime, iFlyTech, and there are the elites. They essentially live physically in a kind of Orwellian society. Financially, they live in a kind of United States and Paris. They can fly out to Europe for wine tasting. They can fly out to New York, Los Angeles for vacation, shopping. At the same time, because life is so good for them, they don't want to speak out. It's too risky. So this is the kind of model. So you have to subject yourself to government surveillance. This is the music to the ears of authoritarian dictatorship or authoritarian countries around the world. The Chinese surveillance techniques have been exported to over 80 countries based on a testimony given to my commission by a China expert. This was about 18 months ago. I'm sure that the number is much higher. And they also...
Nury, there's something that was in your book that I think is really important to capture before we lose it in time here. And that we've been talking about the prison system and how they have these great big prisons where they put the bad people. But it was what really captured my attention was how they re-engineered the cities so that the cities themselves are prisons. You talk about how they bulldoze whole neighborhoods and then rebuild them in blocks that could be supervised by the party person in charge of them, and then how they put up cameras, and then how they have voice recognition and face recognition, and how they have big trucks with super sensitive listening devices that go around from neighborhood to neighborhood and just listen to what you're talking about in your own home. And this is not in the prison, this is in the neighborhoods.
Yes. So a senior official, Dan Nidell, standing next to Secretary Blinken, said last spring that Chinese government has created an open-air prison for the entire Uyghur population. I think he's right. We have been rightfully focused on those millions of Uyghurs taken into concentration camps, children orphanage or children's camp, prison camp, and labor camps. But we cannot lose sight of the people who are in the society or at their homes who have been subjected to. I wanted to tell something very, very personal and also common in the Uyghur community, that because of this truck, because of this mobile data scan machines set up on the street corners, randomly scanning individual phones, mobile devices, compelled Uyghur families to cut ties with their overseas foreign-based children, loved ones, siblings. I was one of those people who did not have direct contact with family members because my family willfully deleted my contact out of concern that their contact stored, the cache is stored on her phone, might end up getting them into trouble. But I have been able to communicate with my family in the last 2 years since my appointment to the U.S. government. I have been able, but the other Uyghurs cannot say that. I still do know a handful of Uyghur people haven't heard their loved one's voice for years. I know it for a fact that the president of the World Uyghur Congress, Dolkun Isa, learned about his mother's passing through Radio Free Asia reporting, whom he had not had a chance to talk with, hear the voices for a long, long time. This gentleman that I told you, I described you earlier, who wrote that amazing report on the China's cultural destruction, haven't been able to check up with his family for a long time. His dad is in the concentration camp. And his father was a state employee, editor in Xinjian Civilization magazine. So because of this surveillance, some people, some ordinary people could not even have the life that most Americans cannot even appreciate. Being able to get on the phone and call loved ones. That kind of basic freedom has been taken away. This is all Googleable, folks. This is all Googleable, folks. Just to go to Google, just even type my name, type the name Uyghur, you will find a wealth of information. This is no longer something that we can ignore. Even the size of the camps that I told you about is on Reuters' website. If you Google tracking China's Muslim gulag, you will see a disturbing images, before after images, with some statistical information that will blow your mind.
Amy?
Yeah, I have one more question. Nury, so before the COVID, Xinjiang province is a favorite tourist destination for the whole world, and also especially Chinese inside of China. Everybody want to go to Xinjiang, because they have lots of exotic things to see. And but the CCP's excuse, say, put those people in the can, monitoring them, whatever it is they say that they are the terrorists, because there was happened before the COVID a couple of years ago, and they have lots of bombings happen. So the Uyghur people did that? Or they really have a terrorist group? That's my question.
The United States, as a country that was a victim of global terrorism, never set up a concentration camp, never rounded up Muslims in this country and sent them to camps, subjecting them to collective punishment. The European countries, France, Germany, UK, had a sizable population of their own, went to Syria to fight, alongside of Al-Qaeda, alongside of even ISIS. Never been subject to the population there. Of course, I cannot speak for the ones that they went to that places. Even hypothetically, there's an armed resistance exists. No one can verify or tell me with a straight face that those things that you're citing has in fact been verified. We cannot take things what CCP says at face value. I need to call out the international community. Every time when the Chinese authorities, the Communist Party say something on other matters, the international community is so skeptical, rightfully so. This is a dishonest government. To this day, we still don't know the origin of COVID.
Never have an open investigation, real honest investigation.
We
so
do.
Nobody know the truth.
I'm being cynical. They don't allow independent entities to investigate and at least tell the people. We lost 1 million of our fellow citizens in here. So to this day, this is the government. What on earth that international community, good people, journalists, government officials believe in that kind of a hyperbolic statement? I would like to read a report, investigation done by independent entities. All of it that you cited are essentially copy and paste from the Chinese statements. To this day, we have not had anyone. I'm sure that some Uyghurs, frustrated Uyghurs, wanted to take up arms against the Communist Party. It's normal. Look at Ukraine. We're arming them.
Sure.
And this is not unusual. Read the book called Ghost War by Steve Cole and see how governments armed resistance when it's necessary. So this is not unusual, and I don't second guess that some Uyghurs wanted to take up arms against the CCP. That's not the point. The point is you cannot lock up the entire population in this open air prison, and you cannot set up modern day concentration camps and subjecting this vulnerable religious ethnic group to a modern day genocide. And you cannot continue to tell the world that you're doing this in order to protect a stable society. That's not how it works.
Well, to put that in context as well, from what I've heard, you have to file all sorts of paperwork and go through a whole vetting process in Xinjiang if you want to purchase a knife. So I don't know exactly.
They have the barcode on the knife.
Exactly.
I was in Uzbekistan, Bukhara, the ancient city, recently, and I walked into a knife shop. That's the kind of knife shop that I've seen as I grew up in Kashgar. And even the butchers, everyone has the chain in their knives. The usual stuff that they had to use in the butcher store has to have a code and also a chain. I mean, a
chain of custody.
Yeah. So that's there are a lot of crazy stuff that's happening, and the right question is this helping the regime? Absolutely not. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Is this helping the international image? I never seen China as isolated today, rightfully so. We should not ignore this kind of atrocities. And the leadership in Beijing need to think twice. And also, this is unfair to the Chinese people. This regime is committing the genocide in Chinese people's name. And this will be a stain, as Pompeo said, stain of the century. This will be a stain in the Chinese history. Former Deputy National Security Advisor Matt Pottinger delivered a speech in Chinese in 2020 in the occasion of Mayflower movement. Movement. He said, did you know that your government is operating in large-scale concentration camps in your country? Have you heard that your government is collectively punishing your fellow citizens? That's the message that needs to resonate.
Well, did it get through to the rest of China? because China has, as we all know by now, pretty much a lock on communications, on what goes in. Amy, do you think the information about the Uyghurs can get through? No, you can't shake your head. You have to say no.
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 One anecdote, Michael.
Sure.
You know, I gave a speech at the Oslo Freedom Forum exactly 3 years ago. This is how this project was started, this book project. I initially believed that the Chinese people don't have a voice in this. I still believe to the degree that they have no voice, for the reasons that I started. But at the same time, the Chinese educated Chinese intellectuals, like the ones who were exposed to outside world, had degrees, received degrees in Europe and the United States or North America, tend to believe in the Chinese propaganda, CCP propaganda, more so than the ordinary people. It's just mind-boggling. I recently read something about the public opinion on Ukraine and on Russia. It's the same population pool. It's also the same population, same type of people. The population that I was referring to supporting Putin, condemning the United States, are the type of population think that this is not something that the CCP created, that this is something some Western government, the United States, created to hamper China rights. So there's a serious pocket of the population tacitly supports Xi Jinping's ongoing crimes against humanity.
Well, we would expect that to be the case because he's going for his third term.
Life term.
Yeah, so Nury Turkel, holy smokes, no escape. The true story of China's genocide of the Uyghurs. You can check it out and check out the show and listen to the show again at China Watch Radio. Nury, thank you so much for writing this book, and thank you for standing up and fighting for your people.
Absolutely.
And for your people and for all the people of the world, because Lord knows we need your help. Thank you, Nury. And
thank you
all
so much, gentlemen.
Tuning
in.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take it away.